Police officers of Reddit, what was something you saw someone do that made you say wait, is that illegal? Repeatedly driving around a roundabout, like 25 times in a row. Then my friend got pulled over for this once. He was driving into an apartment complex to pick up his friend when he realized he had no idea which apartment they were at. Phone was ringing and he decided to just kept going around the roundabout since it was 11 PM and there were no other cars. Police just checked to make sure he wasn't drinking lol. This situation is about my buddy who was a sheriff's deputy with me a few years back. My buddy bought a house that was being sold at a county auction. The house had been taken because the previous owner didn't pay their property taxes for a couple years. It was a public auction with open bids. Buddy won the bid, flipped the house, then started renting the house out for extra money. We make shit money for what we do. He did this a couple times, got a few more houses and rented them out. Guy worked his ass off doing this for years. Well, someone filed an anonymous complaint with the county citing a law from the late 1800s stating that an individual who works in public service cannot purchase property from a county auction. County had no choice and told him either he had to resign or sell his properties. He resigned and I don't blame him. Not a cop, but I know someone who was on the receiving end of this. I always carry lights when I'm longboarding in the dark, even though I don't have to. It's purely a safety measure. My friend doesn't, and he got pulled over for it once. The cops were literally about to give him a fine, and my friend had to explain to them that he wasn't obligated to carry lights since skaters are pedestrians according to my country's traffic law. Drunk on an electric scooter. I met this guy at the neighborhood bar who said he has to ride his scooter to the bar because he got too many doers. My state doesn't allow underglow on normal vehicles, but encourages extra lighting like that on motorcycles. My favorite police incident in my whole life has been the cop that parked his car at a stop sign to give somebody a parking ticket because the bumper was maybe 1 foot past the do not park beyond this point sign, while the rest of the car was good. An old lady of Latin descent, 70s I'm guessing, attempts to go around the illegally parked cop car and gets into an accident. She flips out on the cop, screaming at him in Spanglish for being so careless. He just put his head down as this old lady berated him for parking like a fucking asshole. Sometimes I miss Baltimore. Some family reported their car as stolen. When I asked them to come to the station for the hearing, they just told me it was never stolen. They left it in a car dealer to be sold. The business went wrong and the dealer would not pay them what they wanted or return the car. So they reported it stolen because that way the police will get the car back faster. They were very simple people and I figured a way not to screw them over this. I forgot to mention all of this was in Brazil. The law may be different in other countries and define such situation as theft. Since we are on the subject, is it technically illegal to make a right-hand turn at a red light, immediately U-turn, and make a right-hand turn again, basically bypassing the red light? I'm assuming no, as long as the U-turn itself is legal, but it feels so cheap and makes me feel so dirty. Driving above the posted school zone speed limit when the sign states 20 miles per hour when children are present. Well then, what constants present? Children inside the school? Children playing well away from the road in the fenced-in yard? Just school hours in general? During after-school sports and activities? No idea. So, unless someone's blatantly reckless and an asshole, I won't stop people for driving over the posted 20. Every time I walk down the street and see/smell someone smoking pot, I know it is legal now, but my brain still thinks it is illegal for about the first 2 seconds. My mate rode the train in only his boxers after he lost his swimming pants, or whatever you English people call it. A cop was on the same train as us, and he just kept looking like he didn't know what the fuck to do, because it's not really written in the rules that you cannot ride a train in your boxers if you pay for it. LMAO. I've had 2 separate occasions where I got stopped because a cop didn't know something was legal. When my friends and I were 15, we bought some cheap kites at the dollar store and decided to take them with us downtown. We live in Chicago and fly them. We started trying to fly them by the Art Institute when we got stopped by a cop. He told us that kites were not allowed to be flown anywhere in the downtown area, and if he saw us doing it again he would give us a $250 citation. It seemed kind of weird since Millennium and Grant Park were both in the downtown area, but we didn't argue. Years later I found out that it actually was an obscure law, but a law that was repealed in the 1970s. Turns out we were just fine flying our kites and that cop just didn't know it wasn't illegal anymore. The second time happened maybe a year after, that one with the same friends. We liked going to Maxwell Street Market really close to closing time because sometimes we'd get things for free or really cheap because sellers just want to get rid of them. My friend and I got these two cop hats for free from this guy. Mine was just plain blue, but his had a checkered pattern on it. Here is a picture of his eye put on a traffic cone smoking a cigarette. Later that day we are walking around smoking cigarettes in Bilson, which is where he lived and I grew up. A cop car pulls up to us and stops us. I thought it was going to be because he saw us smoking and we looked young, but the driver asks to see my friend's hat and asks us where we got them. My friend gives it to him and he hands it off to his partner and we tell him how we got it. He tells us we shouldn't be wearing those hats because it's illegal and his partner is sitting there trying to rip off the checkered pattern. My friend's older brother who was with us tells the cop that's not completely true and that it would be illegal if we had badges on them and were going around saying we were cops, which we weren't. The cop knew he had a point, so he takes the hat back from his partner, gives it to my friend, and says, well, you shouldn't wear them around here or you'll get shot. Although Pilsen wasn't the best neighborhood around then, I doubt two 16-year-olds were going to be mistaken for cops, especially since one of them was on skateboard. I had a cop pull me over and threaten to give me a ticket for failure to yield to his vehicle. There was a guy up ahead speeding like crazy. I was passing a line of semis that had no room to merge between them, and I didn't realize the car behind me was police as his was unmarked and had no sirens or lights on. He was tailgating me, so I did move out of the passing lane as soon as there was a spot. I'm fairly certain if he had given me a ticket it wouldn't have stood up, given that you don't normally have to move over for emergency vehicles when they don't have their lights on. Saw a kid drop a donut on the ground. Nearly radioed for backup before I remembered I could tell the kid to be more careful with his food. Not a police officer, but the viceroy of a trade federation. My boss, let's call him Sidious, asked me to start landing our troops on Naboo despite having ambassadors of a chancellor of a senate on board our ship. Although it went well at first, it didn't turn out well at the end as the ambassadors helped destroy our fleet. We got one of the ambassadors though at the end. Was a big plus. News story about a man in Louisiana who rode his horse home drunk. The officer pulled him over to arrest him, and he said that the horse knew the way home. The officer couldn't give him a DUI because he was on the horse and only gave him a ticket for public intoxication. Somebody I knew would go to a store and find stuff he wanted to steal. Instead of walking out with it, he'd throw it in the trash and come back at night to dumpster dive for it. Dumpster diving is legal here. Apparently you can run a yellow light. My dad got a ticket once for not slowing down enough at a yellow light. I was pulled over a few years ago for not coming to a complete stop at a yield sign. I had slowed down, looked both ways, and for oncoming traffic, and then pulled into the street. There were absolutely no cars on the road. I had a cop try to give me a ticket for sleeping in my car on the side of the road in a residential area. I was too tired to continue driving home after a visit with my C's, so I took a ramp off the interstate and parked and took a nap to avoid an accident. Literally doing what they recommend to avoid endangering people on the road. I forget the charge, but he basically tried to slap me with some fine that particular area gives to homeless people. Homeless people, if they loiter or hang around too long. Took me a full half hour to convince the guy I wasn't homeless. I was leaving to drive the rest of the way home ASAP, and I was doing what I knew to be safe, and that the 2 fire engines and 3 squad cars they deployed were insanely unnecessary even if I was. Guy just seemed pissed as I was to get a call in the night from whatever rich Scardipus couldn't handle some guy taking a con nap and minding his own damn business. I still get sketched out whenever I smoke CBD weed here in Indiana. It's federally legal, but it looks and smells almost exactly the same, and even when carrying the test results I feel like it won't be enough for some power tripping discount gym teacher. When I was in college, I had a cop pull me over one time for driving with my parking lights on. I was driving my brother's car because mine was in the shop and both headlights had just shorted out as I was driving home from a party where I was a designated driver. I lived in a township that doesn't think street lights are worth spending the money on, so it was dark as fuck. I flipped on the brights and proceeded to drive home slowly. This cop pulls me over and threatens to shoot me for not pulling over right away. I pointed out that I was single female driver on a dark as fuck road in the middle of nowhere and that I had the right to slow down, signal the cop to follow, and proceed to somewhere I felt safe where I wouldn't have to worry about being raped, which is what I did. He kind of guffawed at that and then writes me a ticket for driving with my parking lights on. I explained to him my situation and also pointed out that those weren't the parking lights, they were the brights. I also kindly asked that if those weren't my brights, would he kindly show me where the brights were so that I wouldn't make this mistake in the future? He reaches into the car, immediately flips on the brights, the ones he called parking lights, gets flustered and says how should I know? It's not my car. Drops the ticket in my lap and leaves in a huff. I argued the ticket with the court. The cop legally should have written me a fixed ticket, which doesn't have to be paid if the repairs are made within a certain amount of time. Instead, he wrote me a more expensive ticket for something I wasn't even doing. Turns out the lawyer handling the cop's side of the case was my dad's cousin. He called my dad, asked what happened, and replied, "Yeah, that sounds like Bob. He's not the sharpest crayon in the box." He told the judge the cop who wrote my ticket was an nincompoop. I didn't have to pay.